So hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining my talk about converting Java to Kotlin. My name is Charfaoui Younes. I'm an Android developer from Algeria. And in today's talk, we are going to see some of practical tips to converting Java to Kotlin. Let's get started. So basically, all you need is this command shortcut, right? So basically, you need to press all the keyboard buttons in your Mac or in your Windows, plus the letter K, which stands for Kotlin, of course. And like magic, it will convert everything to Kotlin. That's basically all you need. If you didn't know that before, you can go ahead and start it. Yeah, that's basically it. See you at Kotlin Conf 2024, maybe? Yeah, so it's more than that, of course. So what you are going to see in today's talk is 4 main topics, right? Why we are doing the conversion in the first place. We are going to create a conversion plan, and we are going to see some of the practical tips for the conversion, and finally, some of the random stuff that didn't fit well in the previous chapters. Okay, so let's start with, let me convince you first about using Kotlin. So why we are using Kotlin? Well, I'm going to throw a bunch of things you already know about Kotlin. So Kotlin is concise, you already know that. It has a null safety via the type system, which is a very good thing. It has more functional concept, explicit. We did have something in Java like that, but in Kotlin, it's more explicit, right? It is the Android first language, of course, and it is created by JetBrains, which means more great IDE support, which is a good thing also. And the beauty of it, it is 100% Java interoperability, which make us do the migration incrementally. So not only that, we do have a lot of great things. We do have rich standard library, it will help us do many of day-to-day work things. We have a lot of good things, data classes, extension functions, delegate, smart casting. We do have even specific things in the language as coroutines and flows, of course. And with Kotlin, you can use Kotlin-specific libraries such as Jetpack Compose. You can't use that in Java, for example. Not only that, and it is mainly used in almost a lot of the application in the Play Store, of course. Like, how many of you are using Kotlin on production right now? Almost all of you. Of course, it's Kotlin Conf, that's why. Yeah, but yeah, never mind. So that's basically the features that we have in Kotlin. So you can do the conversion if these features, like the features, the aforementioned features I talked about, allow your code base to grow. So if this is applied to you, you can use it, of course. It helps you deliver features faster. It will help you to increase your productivity and, by consequence, increase the developer happiness. If this thing applies to your case, well, definitely you can go from Java to Kotlin. Of course, you need some experience in Kotlin. Well, the learning curve for the Kotlin, if you are already a Java developer, it's not a big thing. It will be steeper, but you need to have some experience. Awesome. It doesn't mean Java is bad, like we are talking like that. Doesn't mean Java is bad. On the contrary, if you are using Java and you are fine with it, you can keep it, right? You can keep it. If you can add and maintain features easily, especially if you are mastering all the tech stack, well, most of the libraries you are using in Java, you can keep using Kotlin. But if it is fine with you using Java, you can't tell business people I'm going to Kotlin. You can keep using the Java code, of course. Don't switch to Kotlin because everyone is using Kotlin, okay? That's catchy. All right, this is about why we are using Java. Now let's talk about the conversion plan. We are going to create a conversion plan for this task. The first component of the plan you need to define is the goal. What is your goal for converting to Kotlin? It is 100% Java code, the Kotlin code base, sorry. Maybe that's your goal. Maybe not. Maybe you want to write only the new files in Kotlin. This is also a good thing. Or maybe you will have this for sure, you will have a mixed code base between Java and Kotlin for some time. Here you need also to think about that time, right? So I don't know, it will take 6-month transition, 1-year transition. It is up to you. You need to define those explicitly. Okay, this is an undiscussable goal. Our goal is to reach idiomatic Kotlin. We are not going to convert to Kotlin just like that. We are not exchanging the Java syntax to Kotlin syntax. We want to use the best practices and the idiomatic Kotlin stuff. So please, if you are going to keep using the Java syntax in Kotlin, don't do that, please. Don't waste your time. All right, let's talk about the code we are going to convert. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the code status. So at that point, you may, maybe you don't like your architecture, maybe you do have a bad code in your thing, so it is, I'm not going to talk about that. That's your problem, of course, it's not mine. My problem is with the tests. I'm talking about the legacy components of your code. So for me, for microfeeders, like in his book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code, like legacy code is a code without tests. So you either have some tests in your code base, or you don't have, right? It's either one of two things, of course. So for both cases, you can do the migration, you can move to Kotlin. I will share like two main strategies to do that. So if you don't have tests, you can still do the conversion, of course, but the first thing I suggest you doing is, of course, to create some tests in Kotlin. That's the first option. And please don't tell me I don't have time to write the test, because you do have time to do the conversion, right? Well, this is refactoring, so definitely consider writing the tests. But I know you will tell me that it is hard to test, like the architecture is not well suited for tests and so on. So maybe it's a little problematic. You still can write the test. What you need to do, which is a good thing, which will guarantee somehow until some probabilistic thing, right, is to pair with the teammate to do the conversion and do it yourself. What you need to do is write your code from scratch. So you will act as translator. Here is your Java file from here, and here is a new KT file from here, and you will start translating. You will see an array list, right here, a mutable list. I don't know, it is up to you. This will be good things. It will help us as two pairs to criticize the Java code first, okay? So this is a good thing. This is a good thing to avoid some bugs related to the conversion. Or, of course, you can, use the J2K converter, which is Java to Kotlin, and after that, copy the code from that new file in your new file. New file, of course. All right, that's if you don't have tests, of course, that's the strategy I would follow. If you do have tests, well, this is a good option. Just do the J2K converter with the shortcut we showed earlier. Run the test. If it passes, good. If it doesn't, roll back, and I don't know, try to figure why it didn't pass. But here, we have a serious question, like, what should we convert first? Should we convert the production code, like in Java, should we convert the production code or the test code? Like, this is debate, and for that sake, I'm also requesting you to answer for this question. I do have my opinion, but this is an open question we can discuss about, right? For me, I always start with the test first. Why? It's not because I apply TDD, but because test code are usually easy, right? We don't have if and else's, we don't have while loops. Maybe I don't know if you have while loops in your tests, but like the test code are pretty easy. So you can convert the test code first, and then you can check if the production is still working. If it's still working, it means the tests are testing kind of the same thing. What you need also to do, maybe, is to compare the coverage between the Java code and the test code, right? It must be the same. Like I'm talking about the Java code and the Kotlin code, of course, for the test. It must be the same, so it means we are testing the same thing. So for that sake, maybe it doesn't matter, I don't know, maybe you can start with the production code, you convert it first to Kotlin, and then you can move to the test. But for me, Java code testing Kotlin code isn't the same as Kotlin code testing Java code. Because sometimes you do have variability in the features. For example, you have here checked exception, from here you don't have it. So you have here the null reinforce, from here you don't have it. So it's kind of different, right? So the strategy matters a lot. And please share your opinions with us. This is a live pool. I will give you 2 milliseconds to run the test, to scan the QR code. Or use that link, test or production. All right. So after talking about the status of the code and the goal, which code we are going to convert first? Which code? So the strategy you can follow is to convert as you go. Whenever you touch a file in Java, you can start converting it. This is a simple strategy you can follow. You can also query from the Git. I will share a Git command in which it will give you the most touched file in your code base for example, the past 10 months or 12 months, for example. And then you can start refactoring those files. Maybe you want to convert the biggest Java files so you can see the progress in the GitHub. I would love to see that, so you can reach 100% if that's your goal. Or you can just use, write the new code in Kotlin. This is up to you. You can have a hybrid strategy also if you want to. So that was about the plan. Now, let's talk about some of the tips. Specifically, we are going to tips about the J2K converter, right? The first thing we did with my team at EM360 is to create a guideline for the team, right? So what this guideline, like this kind of guideline, or you can name it standards if you want, that will apply specifically at your team. So here you need, it will help us to ensure consistency in the written Kotlin code in all the code base. Not only that, you can put there the best practices you like in your context, in your preferences, in your team. You can also share the idiomatic Kotlin stuff you would like. And of course, this will be a great reference for the new developers. So what you are going to put in these standards, in this guideline, you can name it whatever you want. You are going to define how you are going to utilize the language features. Maybe you like something, maybe you don't like something about Kotlin. This is up to you. This is up to the team, of course. You need to include the mandatory stuff and the required standards you need always to have in your code. And of course, you can include also some best practices and, if possible, good things. Let's see some examples. So here is an example of a rule. Always create separate PR for the conversion. Maybe that would work for you. Always use the J2K converter. This is a rule. You don't have to create the convert from scratch, because using the J2K, we can ensure some Java interrupt, right? And also, it will help us to create an extra commit. I will talk about that later. Always prefer nullable type over late init vars. This is a rule. Maybe it doesn't apply to your team, of course. Use immutable types whenever possible. Never use a double bank. For example, I have a friend, he told me that in his code base, we don't use double bank at all, right? So whenever there is something nullable, we will have to deal with it, okay? This is a rule. Maybe you can apply it at your team also. Use scoping functions wisely. This is a controversial topic, so it is also up to you how to use scoping functions. So this thing are team preferences, right? Team preferences. So here's an example of team preference that apply at my team. So previously, I shared this in a tweet, right? I told the people, hey, whenever you're trying to do some nullable stuff in order to do something with that receiver, just use the let function with the nullable and use it. And people told me here, well, the let is a mapping function, so don't use it to replace if and else's. Here in this context, this let applies well in my team, with my friends, right? We don't have a problem with it. If it doesn't apply to our team, of course, you don't have to use it, but I'm talking here about some team preferences. We can't agree upon everything in Kotlin, of course. So you can use whatever you want, at least if it is applied in your team. So what are some standards to define in this guideline? So define some standards related to Kotlin, specific Kotlin features such as nullability, late init, lazy initialization, how we are going to use the Kotlin standard library functions, scoping function, data classes, like specific Kotlin specific things, and even for collections and some tests. Maybe you don't like that backstick in the unit test. It is up to you, of course. Let's talk about the converter plugin, which is Java to Kotlin converter. The beauty of it is, well, first of all, please change the shortcut for it, because right now you have to tap all the keyboard buttons plus the letter K, which is a mess. You can, especially if you are going to do that for the many files, you can define like Command K, for example, to do that thing. It helps us with the Java interrupt. That's the beauty of it. That's the most important thing about it, because that way we can convert the code base incrementally. Here I suggest before attempting to do the Kotlin converter action, try to pre-process the Java code. Maybe try to include some nullability annotation to help the compiler or to help the plugin in order to add the exact nullable types. The beauty, you can also convert multiple files at once. Let's say you have simple Peugeot classes, some event classes or something. You can convert them all at once. And one critical thing about it is that it helps us to preserve the Git history for the Java file. Right? You can do that manually when coding from scratch. You can do this git move. Let's say you have a file in Java, just rename it in Kotlin. Otherwise, if you delete the Java file and replace it with the Kotlin file, you delete the Java history. The plugin by default do that by default. So be aware of that. That's why it is a mandatory thing at my team to use it. Now, here is an example. Here's an example of by default commit. This is rename Java to Kotlin of Cuban transformer, for example. This is an extra commit, and then it will come your commit. More tips about the converter plugin. Well, here I will share some algorithm to run after doing the plugin. You need to do a manual review. You won't like everything about the conversion, right? So do a manual review. In this manual review, you need to handle the nullability and the usages of the double bang operator, of course. Try to inline the variable initialization. This will be the result of the converter plugin, of course. Try to use Kotlin, try to use collection extension function. A lot of time in Java code, you can replace a lot of things with extension function, especially if you are using some while and for loops. You can use, if you are doing some filtering or transformation, you can use the extension function there. Use scoping function, handle warning and suggestions, and of course, ensure idiomatic Kotlin, of course. That's kind of a mini pseudocode you can use whenever you do the review, whenever you review a J2K action. More tips about that, of course. So as I said, it ensures interoperability, of course, and as I said, you can use those annotation in order to make the conversion more seamless. Here, you need also to use and specify some of the Kotlin JVM annotation, because this annotation will ensure and control some aspect of the byte code. So we have different annotation for specific things. For example, if you want to say to the Java code that there isn't a checked exception from the Kotlin code, you can use the add throw annotation. You can use the JVM suppress wildcards, for example, because in Java we use site variance, in Kotlin we use declaration site variance. So by default, it will generate the wildcard from the Kotlin side. So use that annotation to suppress that error. Like, you need to get familiar with this annotation to have a good mixed code base. All right. Let's talk about platform types. Now, platform types is the result of this migrations. It's the result of the interoperability, of course, between the Java and Kotlin. So, as I said, it is the result. And the problem, it can lead to runtime null pointer differences. And this is the big issue. And this is due because Java and Kotlin resolve nullability, especially when overloading differently. So that's part of the issue. So as a rule, as I said, use the not null and nullable annotation from the Java to indicate to the Kotlin that this might be nullable. And whenever you are receiving something from the Java world, I always consider it as nullable. I always declare something coming from the Java world as nullable, and then I can do my if-else, smart casting, and go. Here is an example. So there is some Java function I don't care about. Whenever I get something from Java, I put the nullable, and then I can handle it with if-else, smart casting, and I can go. Yeah. OK, let's talk about some of the random stuff that didn't fit well in the previous chapters. So here is a great Git command. This is credit to Nicholas Carlo, who shared this on his LinkedIn page. So basically, this will allow you to select the top 15 files changed during the most changed during the last 12 months. You can basically change the inputs there, the parameters there. So you can select those files, and you can start with those files to do the conversion. This is a great Git command. All right. So one of the good things we do have in Kotlin is a lot of linting and formatting tools. So basically, you can use this linting tool to reinforce the code style we talked about earlier. So previously, we defined the guideline, some standards to use. So you can use linting rules, such as we do have a lot of them. Static analysis tools such as KTLint, detect, dictat. We have also some formatters. So this thing will ensure that we are reinforcing our code style we defined earlier. This allows for consistency, automation, and all, of course, continuous improvement. OK, let's talk about checked exception. So what are checked exceptions? So first of all, we don't have checked exception in Kotlin. You already know that. But what are checked exception? So checked exception, as we defined previously in Java, is they are checked by the compiler. So what we do in the signature, we define the exception that might be thrown, and the compiler will check that we are either handling it in a try-catch, or we are providing it for the next call, right? We don't have checked exception in Kotlin, almost in the new languages, because it's considered as dead-end design for the languages. A lot of the languages are not using it because the people abuse the usage of it. So how we are going to deal with exceptions right now? We do have normal and checked exception, but most of the time, because the beauty of checked exception, it always remember us that there is an exception there, you have to handle it, okay? So how we are using this? Well, first of all, in order to include, to tell the Java word that this is checked exception, as I said, use the @throw for the Java interrupt, of course. But a lot of the time, especially in the Kotlin API, you are going to see something or null. First or null, get or null, I don't know, map or null. So a lot of the time, this is the good way in order to replace or indicate that an exception may happen, of course. A lot of time you will see that. So whenever you are designing your API, try to follow that pattern. And for the folks who still love checked exception because it is ensured at compile time and it is included in the signature, you can use the either package or the result4k package. This is described well in a book of refactoring Java to Kotlin by NetPrice and Duncan. So basically, you need to define this class. This is a sealed class, left and right. So by standard, the left will be for the exception type, and the right will be for the success type. And let's say we do have some parse state function, right? So here, as you can see, in the signature, we do have the string as a result, which is the exception, the message of the exception, and the success type, which is the date type. So basically, some try and catch, and you are going to return the result in the right if it is good. Otherwise, you are going to return the exception message in the left. This is a good thing, and how you can use it, since this is a sealed class, you can use it with the when to check, the compiler can check the exhaustiveness, and you can use it as it is shown. Also, there is the result4k package, which is a library, which is kind of exactly the same thing, but it has more utility functions. So here is, for example, the same function, but you can see the result, which is the date and the exception. So the exception is from the right side. And there is this result from utility function that you can pass lambda, and it will put that lambda into a try catch. If throw an exception, it will return that exception. And as I said, it contains a lot of utility methods. So as you can see, you can use the or throw, result or throw. You can use on failure, so you can pass a lambda. Otherwise, it will get you back the result. Or you can use the normal when with success and failure cases. OK, let's move on to Kotlin contract. So Kotlin contract is an experimental feature, as you may already know. It will help the Kotlin compiler with more details that we know as a developer. But please don't abuse it, and it requires more attention because it can introduce a lot of bugs, especially if you have big functions. Here's an example. Here's an example that takes any, nullable any, and we are checking is valid text. If it is a valid text, we are implying this is custom DSL here. We're applying that this is string, and by using that in the code, we can use the smart cast to complete with string. So this is a good thing to add to your domain modules if needed or something like that. Smart casting. Well, smart casting is really smart. Like I saw in many cases, it is really, really smart. Like I included some cases, it's a little bit problematic, but it was able to detect the right type, or at least the nullability type. It helps us to simplify our code, and it works well with if and the when statements. And it works with vars and sometimes with vars, so it doesn't always work with vars. The vars need to be defined in some local bound. So whenever you have that case, I always create temporary val from that var and use the smart cast to simplify the code. Of course, domain models. Let's move on to domain models. So domain models are a good place to start the migration from. Domain models represent a great opportunity because sometimes it is simple, pure code, right? So it presents a good opportunity to start the migration from. It is the backbone of the application, so it represents a great time investment. Here, try to update the nullability to provide more type safety for the client using it. And the beauty of it, you can use one single file in Kotlin, right? So maybe you have a class in which you have email, password, and those are value objects. So previously in Java, you have to define every class in a separate file. But with Kotlin, you can define the related stuff into one single file, so I don't have to be back and forth between the files. And here you can use Kotlin-specific features to enrich the domain models, such as you can use operators, you can use, for example, tape aliases, if that's the case for you, extension function, and so on. And a lot of the cases, since I'm an Android developer, you can use, a lot of the times, I use partialize plugin. So if you have a plugin, so this plugin will help us to generate some code related to the feature of parcelable in Android stuff. So if you have some plugin to use, consider using it. Sealed classes. So here I'm not talking about the features of Kotlin itself. I'm talking about some anti-patterns I saw people doing when converting Java to Kotlin. So usually sealed classes are used to represent a restricted class hierarchy. The subclasses must be defined in the same file or at least nested, and it plays really well with the when function because the compiler can check the exhaustiveness if it's needed. It provides safe runtime type check, but the issue is I saw people converting enums to sealed classes, and that's the issue. Enums are not sealed classes as you may guess, because usually enums represent one instance. We do have one instance of each enum during the software running, but with sealed types, with sealed subtypes, you can have many instances. And the beauty of sealed classes, how you can take advantage from, is that you can add new different functions to each subclass, right? To each subtype, sealed subtypes, and with the when, with smart casting, you can use those methods if you want to. All right. Typesafe builders and DSLs. This is the beauty. This is great features by the Kotlin team. So it allows us to create custom internal domain-specific language. That's the beauty of it. And it requires more code. Here, Kotlin isn't more concise, but the results really worth it. It helps us to create fluent API to configure complex objects. I will show an example here, but use it with caution. Otherwise, it will be an over-engineering. Here's an example shared by Simon in his blog. So he used, like, I don't know if you can see the code, but here I'm trying to do some handshake, right? An SSL handshake. In order to do that in Java, you have to create many of the stuff. You need to create an SSL context and add some trust manager and key manager stuff, and then create socket factory, and from that socket, you can create socket and start the handshake. This is how you can configure it. But here is with the Kotlin DSL. It is much more readable. So we do have socket factory, a key manager. It is used with infix function for more things, right? Trust manager, socket, deciphers, and we start creating our socket. It is much beautiful like that. So if you have some configuration in your code base, of course, consider applying custom DSLs with Typesafe builders, of course. All right, should I convert everything? Like in Kotlin, we do have a lot of the stuff, like especially if we're coming from Java world, for example, RxJava. RxJava, I use it in the Java world, but in Kotlin, we do have coroutines and we do have flows. Should we convert everything? Should we convert all the stack back to the Kotlin stuff? Well, you don't have to. We don't have to. Why? Well, especially if the usage is large and complex, right? And in the context, in the RxJava, you can have both technologies in the same project. That's a beauty, so you can do the migration incrementally. And here you need a little bit experience of coroutines and flow, since the handling, especially here we are talking about structured concurrency, and the handling of the errors and cancellation is a little bit different between the two. But it represents a great opportunity if you want to move to multi-platform. Let's say you want to extract the data package so you can use it in a different place. So considering that point, you can remove RxJava in the favor of flows and coroutines, of course. Yeah, let's talk about another anti-pattern I saw. So we do have late init and buy lazy features in Kotlin, of course. So we usually use late init when we are sure about initializing before usages. For example, in the Android world, we sometimes initialize things in the onCreate, and then we can use them. This will help us to avoid the nullable type and the multiple null checks. This is the point of it. And whenever you see yourself using the isInitialized property, consider using a nullable type, because I saw that a lot. They are avoiding the nullable type, but they are using isInitialized to check if it is initialized or not. So whenever this is the case, consider using the normal nullable type. Of course, lazy initialization will go well with expensive object, and you can use it with thread safety. This is provided directly. So in Java world, in order to do that complex initialization for expensive object, you have to write a lot of code, but with Kotlin, it comes out of the box, of course. This is really well if the creation involves some internal dependency or some conditional stuff. So don't use it just to avoid the declaring items as nullable. So I saw that this is the case. Usually we use lazy for expensive object, but people are using it to avoid the nullable type. They hate using the exclamation mark and the integration mark. All right, top-level functions and the JVM name. So usually when the J2K runs, we'll convert the utility into objects, right? And to object declaration. So with Kotlin, you can convert the methods into top-level function. We don't need a class or an object to store our functions into. And this is represent a great time to move your functions into some extension functions. That would be a really good opportunity for that. And in order to provide some interrupt for the Java, you can rename the file with this annotation to provide the custom name for the Java files. And of course, yeah, that's it. And for automated refactoring, this is a good concept I saw from the Java engineers in their blog about converting 0 to 10 million lines of code, right? So sometimes we do have common problems in our code base, in our Java code base. For example, the use site annotation. So the site annotation, for example, let's take JUnit, for example, when you define a rule, in Kotlin, you have to prefix it with the get, because the JUnits require the annotation to be at the getter, in the bytecode, of course. But by default, the J2K won't be able to do that. So you can create a script that will replace the normal at rule with the normal at get rule. Okay, so this will help us to a great time investment for bigger code bases, and of course, it will accelerate the migration and reduce the manual work. Here is example of the code they are using it. So previously, we used text util to check if a text is empty or not. Now we can replace it with is null or empty. Now, we know that we should do that replacement, but if you do that for bigger code bases by yourself, usually before knowing that, I used to tap the Command, Shift, and F to search for all occurrences with some regular expression and search for the occurrences and replace them by myself or using the Android Studio. But now with some code like that, you can do that and improve and improve the thing. Okay. Now let's talk about artificial intelligence tool. Can artificial intelligence tool replace us, or sorry, can artificial intelligence tool help us? In that case, well, in ChatGPT especially ChatGPT, it can help us to do this conversion. It won't replace us, as I said, but it is a good place to start with because it requires less manual review, right? This is the beauty of it, but it is a little bit slow on bigger files. So that would represent a great time for the community to create some plugin you can use in IntelliJ or Android Studio for that sake. It can help us with a lot of refactoring, but for converting Java to Kotlin, it is in a lot of cases, much better than J2K. And it is really good because it accepts things as context. So maybe you can feed your standards that we defined earlier, the guidelines we defined earlier. You can tell them, hey, I don't want the double bank in my code, so he will remove the double banks. Of course, you have to do manual review. You can't trust it with your life. Here's one thing I noted about him. I told him like to convert something, and here's a statement he told me at the end. Note that the code has been modified slightly to make it more idiomatic Kotlin. Like I didn't tell him to do that, right? So it did that by default, which is a good thing. And the code was pretty good. All right. Finally, let's move to the resources. So basically, there is great books to read about if you are going to attempt that migration. So there is the Java to Kotlin book by Duncan and NetPrice. There is a great book also by Venkat Subramaniam about programming to Kotlin. And of course, the one and the only Kotlin in action. There is this blog post by the meta engineers from 0 to 10 million lines of code. It contains a lot of the good stuff about the experience of moving from Java to Kotlin. And yeah, as a recap, as I said, define the goal for the conversion, try to create a guideline for the team to how to use the Kotlin, use the J2K, start review, and include idiomatic Kotlin, and use refactoring tools if possible, and iterate until 100% of the code is Kotlin. That's basically it. Thank you for joining my talk. My name is Younes Charfaoui. I create content on Android and on YouTube. You can find me on social media stuff. And if you have any question, please, and don't forget to vote on this talk. Thank you very much.